All right. Well, good night, everybody. My name, never mind, you all know my name. This is Joanne, and we are on week 3 of our app prep seminar. So tonight we're going to talk all about writing your experience descriptions, and then next week we're going to talk about everything related to letters of rec. So creating your letter packet, how to ask, when to ask, how to collect them, where they go, interfolio, all of that stuff. So stay tuned for that. But tonight we have a big part of the application to cover. So I know you all know the character count for your personal statement. It is what? 5,300, right? So your personal statement is 5,300. Who knows the character count for if you are applying MD with all 3 of your meaningful and all 15 of your experiences at 700 characters each? How many characters is your experience descriptions? Your work and activity section. Someone's doing the math super quick on their calculator. Who has a total? Anybody? 10,500. So 10,000 over 10,000 characters are going in your work and activity section. Now, do they read your work and activity section before or after your personal statement? It's actually placed before in the AMCAS application. So when we go through an AMCAS app here in a few weeks, you'll see that's okay, that your experiences section comes right before the personal statement. Now, that's not to say they can't read it in a different order. They literally can do anything they want. But where it's placed in the app, if they were just reading the app like not chronologically, but page by page, it would be before. So before they read your story, they read what you did. This is why I think this is such an important part of the application. Not only that, but you all spent, 4+ years doing things. And let's be honest, a lot of the things you did for this purpose. Like you've been building up for this moment for 4 to 5 years, right? Sometimes 6 or 7. So your entire, journey is captured on this page, at least the experiences part. And I am a big believer that this page should show off who you are as a person and the value that you bring to medicine or dentistry. So here's how I like to think about it. Has anybody here seen the movie, the old one? I like the old one better, but the new one works too. The Mary Poppins movie. If you have not, it's a classic. You maybe should watch it just so you can say you know what I'm talking about. You heard it's good. It's like a classic. Like watch the old Mary Poppins, not the new one they made, but the old one. It's you'll see. It's very interesting. So in this movie, you have this nanny who goes into she's like a magical nanny, and she goes into people's homes who need her, and she visits this home who really needs her help. And she opens up her magic bag and she starts pulling things out, like lots of random stuff that would definitely not fit in a bag. Um, and when I think about your experiences section, I think about the Mary Poppins bag because when you go into your future, you're going to bring with you some stuff that you need. The stuff that you need, like leadership skills, your ability to speak in front of a group, your ability to, resolve conflict, your confidence in, talking to people in authority positions. Like there's just bajillions of possible skills that you're going to need in your future. And the whole point of the experiences section is not to just check off a list to make sure that you have done research, shadowed a doctor, um, worked in a hospital, all those things. It's not just a checklist. Like they're not literally just going, oh, you did all the right things. Okay, therefore you're good enough. If that were true, I think a lot more people with high stats would just automatically get into med school. But that's not actually what we see happening. Just because you've checked off the boxes doesn't mean that makes you a competitive applicant. And so, what I understand about your experiences is that you have an obligation to show how that experience, what you bring to the table, what you carry with you into your future from that experience. And I know that there are some influencers slash so-called advisors out there who are telling people to write stories in their experiences section. And well, I'll just say I've worked with a lot of those that person's reapplicants when they tried it that way and it didn't work, and then they come to me and then I have to fix all of it. And it just I don't find that it works. It's really hard to tell a meaningful story in 700 characters. Now, in your meaningful descriptions for my pre-meds, yes, of course, we're going to tell a story. But for your 700 or 600 characters that you're going to use for your descriptions, you can't tell a story. You're not going to be able to get into a character and get through a plot and have a takeaway in one tiny little paragraph. So I really am not a big storyteller fan. Instead, what we want to do is we want to pre-think before we start writing. We want to pre-think about what does this experience say about me? What did I learn from this experience? Like, what am I carrying forward? So I'm going to call those things their takeaways. And sometimes people will just sit down and start writing their descriptions and they really don't know what their takeaway is. And then, they write it and we get to the end and I'm like, what's your takeaway? And they'll, we have to talk about it and they realize their takeaway is something completely different than what they wrote about. And then they have to rewrite it. So it's just a little bit more efficient if you think about what your takeaway is going to be before you start writing it. That way, you know where you're heading when you start writing it. So your takeaways, some of them should be related to the competencies, the core competencies that we talked about on the first day. If you're looking at your competencies list, because it should be printed and taped to your wall, scan that and just see like what experiences have shown any of these competencies. And you only need to show, you can definitely show more than one competency per experience, but in terms of a takeaway, you really need to have one big takeaway. And I know that in most experiences, you probably did 15 or 20 different things. And you're going to go, how do I describe 15 or 20 things in 700 characters? Well, you're not. Like, for example, if you work as a scribe, they know what a scribe does, but you want to give them context. So it's not that you have to define scribing, but you want to give them a context in terms of what type of setting were you in? Were you in the ED or were you in a derm office? Was it a busy clinic? Was it a clinic in a low income community? Was it in an affluent community? Did you serve a diverse patient population? Did you work with one provider or 6 providers? Because those things say things about you, right? Like if you only served one provider, you pretty much got to know that person really well and it probably got pretty easy fast. If you were constantly serving different providers in a fast-paced environment, what does that say about you? How many people have had to work as a scribe for multiple providers? What's the biggest problem? They all have different preferences, right? So you're very adaptable. So you want to think about what was maybe if you were a scribe in a practice with 6 different providers, your takeaway is that you were very adaptable. And so what you write about is how you worked for 6 different providers and how each one wanted, each person had a different way for how they wanted their notes to show up. They had a different preference for where you stood in the room or whatever it is. And you basically talk about that. That's the focus of your description. And then you take away that you learn to adapt to different people's needs, different leaders' needs, and to accommodate different leaders that you're working with. And so that's your main takeaway. But you could also, instead of that, you could talk about, being in a specific field and going home after work and like spending hours researching a particular field so you understood what everybody was talking about at work and how you were a self-directed learner and how in medicine there's so much, you're going to be spending the rest of your life learning things on your own and how that really equipped you to do that. So it really doesn't matter. Like you can take away anything, but the big thing is you have 15 spots, so you want to make sure you're taking away different things. Like you wouldn't repeat yourself anywhere. Even if 2 of your experiences were very similar, you need to find completely different ways to reflect on those experiences. I see a question. It says, if you're doing one activity description for shadowing, do you pick shadowing experience to write about? I think what you're asking is, okay, so we're going to get to this in a bit. When you're listing multiple shadowing experiences in one description, let me save that because I have a whole uh, slide on that. So we're going to get to that. Okay, this is just kind of big picture. Like this is how we're going to think about writing that. So obviously, you guys have done all kinds of different experiences, and many of the things that you've done may not even be on this list. But here's the thing. You have for AMCAS, you have 15. For ACOMAS and other ones, you have unlimited. Um, you literally should put every single thing you did, even the things that are not related to healthcare on there. So let's say you worked at Target for a summer. If you have the spots for it, I would 100% say that you worked at Target for the summer. Those, any type of job where you did customer service, whether you're a bartender or a barista, um, I remember people writing about how they worked as a tattoo artist. One of my most successful applicants this season, she was a band manager and literally toured around the country, scheduling bands, her band. And like that was her experience. Like that's one of her experiences. And so it doesn't like anything you've done, it's okay to put in there. I think people have this fear that everything has to be like uber clinical and so impressive and prestigious and um, people who operate like that tend to not be as attractive to schools. Not that they're not successful. It's just I have seen that people who are a little bit more done things outside the box, they tend to also be just as successful. So what I'm saying is if there is anything about you that isn't necessarily related to healthcare, don't be afraid to put it in there. Like it's not a bad thing to talk about a random job you had. You still have to extract the value of that and then talk about how that has prepared you in the future, but it doesn't matter. Okay, all of your experiences are going to get classified into a type in the application. And this does vary by applications. This is just an example. But for example, like if you played the piano from 5 years old to current, you are going to put that under artistic endeavor. You could possibly put it under a hobby too, but if you have an artistic endeavor like art or music, then you can also have a hobby. I would just put one hobby. I would not put two hobbies. And same thing with like research. Sometimes, if you are in a situation where you don't have more than 15, you could take the same research and have it as research. You can have it as a presentation or poster if you went to a conference and presented it. You can also put it as a publication. So you can take the same experience and break it out 3 times. But what I find to be the case is that most people have too many experiences. And so when that starts happening, they actually start grouping things together. So instead of having like your research under presentations, publications, and research, you might just put it under research and then say that you have a publication. It all depends on how many experiences you have. The other way that people break things out is if they did, like, let's say you worked at a student run clinic for 3 years and you started out as a basic volunteer, then you got moved up to the, you know, I don't know, front desk where you were taking vitals. And then your third position was the director where you were the leader. In that case, you could break that out 3 ways. And one of them, like the first one where you're not really doing anything clinical, would be community service non-medical. If you're taking vitals, you would do community service medical. And if you're a director, you might put that under leadership. Your instinct might be, well, it was a student run clinic, so I want to count all those hours towards clinical. But if you weren't doing, like, if the job title you had was not clinical, don't just put it under clinical just because you were in a clinical space. They actually can see right through that. It would be better to break it out and describe what you really did. And there's nothing wrong with having leadership. Absolutely nothing wrong with that. So if you did a leadership role in a clinical space, that's perfectly fine. They can still see that you were in a clinic. It's not like it doesn't count anymore. It just gives them, like, if they were filtering or sorting by leadership or by a certain quality, a certain type, I mean, then that would come up to the top. And I will say this, that most schools don't filter on clinical hours, they filter on non-clinical community service. So that's the main thing that schools filter on. So if you had hardly any non-clinical community service hours, like less than 50, let's say, that to me would be problematic. More problematic than having, I mean, you need to have some clinical hours, but I would rather you separate some of those out and put them under non-clinical because that's what I know schools screen on. I've had people who've applied to med school once, didn't get in, got feedback from the schools, and multiple times the feedback that they got was that they didn't have any non-clinical community service. And so they would go out and work for Habitat for Humanity or go work at a food bank and then try again, and they were successful. So if you were looking for something to do in the next 6 months, that would be my recommendation. Also, doing it over the next year or two. You need to keep volunteering over your year that you're applying. That is sort of like an unspoken expectation, I think. And you can definitely update them as you go along. Not with the hours, but with what you've learned from the experience. Any questions about fitting things into categories or how things might fit? Okay. This is not like super critical. Like if you accidentally do it wrong, nothing terrible is going to happen to you. It doesn't like automatically reject you or anything. So people get super hung up on this. Really, really type A OCD stuff. Um, I'm gonna help you, but I'm also gonna tell you at some point it really doesn't matter whether you put it as, this or that. At the end of the day, they're just gonna read these all anyway. They're not gonna be looking at the category, analyzing it the way you are gonna analyze it. I promise you, you're gonna analyze this 100 times more than any reader of your application will. Okay, so here's how we're going to start. And some of you are further along than others and already have some of this done. But if you have not done this yet, what I want you to do is open up a Google Doc and I want you to number 1 through 15. If you don't have a limit in your app like ASDAS or ACOMAS, then you can just number 1 through 20. Most people don't have more than 20 experiences. And you are going to start listing every single thing you've done since graduating high school, not stuff during high school, after high school. People will often ask me, well, can I put things that I started in high school and continued through college? Yes. If you kept doing the thing during college, then put the original start date in high school, but you are going to continue your date through college. But if you only did it in high school, then no, I would not put it in your application. The only thing I would put in your application from high school, the 3 Ps, if you were published, patented, or met the president, those are things I would say, yes, you can put in your application. And in the corner here, if you are applying MD, I want to stress to you, please everybody listen, like listen at this moment because every year I have this problem. When you write your experience descriptions, your 700 character descriptions are separate from your 1325 character description, your meaningfuls. They are not combined. They are not one chunk of writing at 2,000 characters. They are two separate boxes. I tell everybody this every year, and no matter what, people come to me with one chunk of writing. So please write that down. Remember that I just told you this, and when you do it, write them in two separate boxes. It will save us time. If you don't, nothing happens. I would just fix it for you. But that's how that works. Okay, so this is basically the structure for our experience writing. So the first sentence is going to be a big picture, like what did you literally do? Now, what you do not need to do is repeat information that is in the description up above it. So I'm going to show you in a second what that looks like. But you don't need to repeat. You don't need to say your title. You don't need to say how long you did it. You don't need to say where you did it because it's all right there in front of them. So don't repeat any information. Just jump right into what you did. Now, instead of saying the hospital name, you could say, a large teaching hospital or a small private clinic or something like that. You could describe it so they have more context. So first sentence is big picture. What did you do? Where were you? What was going on? Then you're going to take 2 or 3 sentences and dive into a particular aspect of the job that leads into that takeaway. So everything should kind of get us to that point. Your takeaways are not going to be that it made you want to be a doctor, okay? So if that is your takeaway, go back and fix it. That's not your takeaway. They already know you want to be a doctor, so they didn't learn anything new about you from that. The amount of times I read this phrase, this reaffirm my desire, like I have a physical reaction when I read this phrase, okay? The other thing I read uh hundreds of times is the phrase the importance of. I learned the importance of dot dot dot. I want you all to write that down. And when you're in your doc, I want you to do a find and I want you to search for the word importance. So when I read, I learned the importance of talking to people. I'm just giving you an example. I don't read, I got better at talking to people. I just read, I learned that talking to people is important. That's not telling me that you're good at it. So I would instead say, instead, I learned the importance of talking to people. I would say, um, by talking to many people, I gain confidence, or something like I gain confidence in talking to many people. So if you're, always try to start actively start your sentences with I, and use your verb as like what you literally gained from that. And there's nothing wrong with saying I gain confidence in. I gain confidence in my ability to resolve conflict. That's a great way to reflect on something. So we're going to try to keep the word desire and passion out of our writing. We're talking about scientists. They don't care about your desires and passions, okay? We are really going to be thinking about this a little bit more pragmatically. All right. Oopsie. I'm going backwards. Okay. So that was for your 700 character descriptions. Now, if you're not applying MD, which maybe one or two of you are not, I apologize. You have to just endure this for a minute. For my MD folks, you are going to write an additional 3 boxes for your meaningful. Now, I know last week we talked about impactful experiences, and that's confusing because impactful and meaningful seem awful similar. Here's one way to think about it. Your impactful experience is not answering why medicine. Your meaningful description is also not answering why medicine. Your personal statement is answering why medicine. So in your personal statement paragraphs, the ending of your paragraphs is telling them how that experience makes you want to be a doctor, right? In some way. These are not doing that. This is answering the question, how did this change you? So it is kind of similar to your impactful, but the difference is that you are going to tell a story. So the stories are going to be just like your personal statement stories. You're going to start out in the moment, kind of like your intro. It's going to be like 3 new intros, but each one, instead of leading into why medicine, is going to lead into how did this impact you? And the impact is change. We want like a measurable change. And the more meaningful that change is, the better. So like an example of a not meaningful change would be I improved my communication skills. Like, absolutely not. It's a hard no for me. So that is not telling me anything interesting. I'm going to show you I mean, I have so many examples of meaningfuls, but that worked. But anything that like really think profoundly. Like, did did it make you reflect on your own implicit bias? Did it teach you did it teach you that you need to always possess cultural humility? There are way more meaningful things, than just basic communication. So I'm going to push you, if I recognize that it's not really that deep, I'm going to push you harder to think more deeply about it, but see how hard you can push yourself before we get to me. What else can I say about this? So when you look at your entire application, I think I told you this before, look at your 3 body paragraphs, or think your 3 main stories in your personal statement and label them. So like what was the takeaway? What was the main idea? And then when you come to your 3 meaningful, I want you to label those as well. Look at them side by side and just make sure that the concepts all kind of fit together. Like it makes sense. It's everything you would want them to know about you. Someone asked, is it okay to repeat the same experience in your personal statement in your most meaningful? 100% yes. It happens all the time. It would actually be strange if none of your personal statement experiences were meaningful. That would actually, yeah, that would be really weird actually. So most people write about their meaningful experiences in their personal statement, but again, we're writing about them very differently, right? Because your personal statement is leading into how that made you want to be a doctor, whereas this is just talking about how it changed you. Really, no mention of medicine needs to happen in your meaningful. It's really just, I did this thing, this really impacted me in this meaningful way. No, your gap year experience does not need to be your most meaningful, and here's why. Most of you start your gap year experience close to the end, like right before you start your gap year. How could something you just started impact you that profoundly? So it wouldn't make a lot of sense for that to be the case. And also in your secondaries, you're going to find out soon enough how many schools ask you what you're doing during your gap year, and they give you a decent amount of characters for it. So you can actually talk about your gap year experiences in your secondaries. And then if they don't, we can always send an update email, after we've been complete and in review for a month, we'll send update emails to the schools. And that's where you can reflect on what you've learned from your gap year so far. So I personally wouldn't waste a spot on a gap year activity. But you can put your gap year activity in your 700 character descriptions and only in AMCAS, but you can project future hours and dates out. You can't do that with the other apps, but you can list, like, let's say you start the job in May. You would put oh, actually, I'm getting ahead of myself. Hang tight. I'm going to explain that in a minute. Okay, I'm going to explain that right now. So this is what the application looks like. And I obviously erased the parts that are identifying. You can see this person did community service, non-medical. The experience name is going to be your job title. So actually this one, I don't like how they labeled this. This is not actually correct. But it would be something like shelter volunteer. That's how I would have probably called this. But what I really wanted to draw your attention to in this case was the date ranges. So in AMCAS, you can list up to 3 date ranges. So let's say you wanted to project out future hours. You would put your first date range, let's say you started in May. You would put May 1st, May of 2026 through June of 2026. So 1 month you did this. And you would put like however many hours you did it for that month, 120, let's say. Then the next date range would be July of 2026 through July or June of 2027. So your next year. And then you would project out your hours for that. So that's how you do future activities in AMCAS. I do not know what's going on with my mouse. It's losing it. Okay. Does anybody have any questions about that, about what I just said about future date ranges? So this is where you would put your gap year activity and you would project your future hours out. You can see you need to have your contact name and title. So if you do not know contact names, titles, and emails of the person from each organization, you need to start tracking that information now. Don't wait until May to figure out you don't know this stuff. Get a document started and then start filling in this information. Sometimes people, like the person below, she started out snowboarding, in middle school. So she had thousands of hours of snowboarding. She had no idea how many hours she had for snowboarding. So what did she do? She made it very clear that she has no idea how many hours she has for snowboarding, and she just made up a random number like 9999, which, if you see it like that, what is that? I mean, most people use common sense. They would say, okay, she has a lot of hours, but she doesn't know how many hours. Did anybody else come to that conclusion when they saw 9999? Or is it just me? Yeah, it's kind of like common sense, right? So if something like that, like, it's not important. This person had 14 interviews and she's at UCLA. So it's not that important. It's not like that serious. Again, you guys are going to make this way more serious than any med school is going to make it. So you need to put as close as possible accurate hours, but when it comes to things like a hobby, obviously you don't know how many hours you did. So some other people just put 0 and they know, like, okay, or they put like 10,000, or it doesn't matter. Like, that's the point, is it really doesn't. Any questions about that? Okay. For your hobby, most people put themselves as the contact. So you wouldn't have anybody else. For every other experience, you should have a leader in that experience. If you did a student run clinic, and let's say your leader is also applying to a health profession school, a medical school, the same ones you're applying to, I probably would not put my competition in my contact. I don't know, unless you just absolutely trust that person 100% with your life. I probably wouldn't. Now, they're not really gonna call these people, but I still just wouldn't. I don't know. It just makes me feel weird that you're gonna put another applicant's information in there. So I would just find someone else to put, maybe an advisor. And if you really have absolutely nobody to put, then just put yourself. Okay, what did I want to show you? But do you tell the contact you're putting them? For experiences, I don't think it's necessary. In all of my years, I've only known one school or one person who had her contacts contacted her experiences, and that was just because the school was trying to rescind her acceptance. If they want to rescind your acceptance, they will find a way to rescind your acceptance. And they usually will start by calling all your experiences and verifying everything. And if you misrepresented yourself in any way, then that gives them a legit reason to rescind your acceptance. So let's hope you never end up in that situation. But that's the only case that anyone has ever been called. I mean, the only other reason someone might call is if they just know the person and they like went to med school with them and they were friends and they're like, oh, this person, I know them. I just want to call them and chat and connect with them. But no, they don't have time. Like they have so many people they're reading. Imagine reading 40, 50 apps in a sitting. Who you're gonna really call and check on each person? If they did not trust you, they're probably just going to tell you no, like reject you. Because if you wrote anything that's questionable or you have red flags in your app, they don't have the energy, the time, they don't need to investigate because they have 6,000 other people who don't have red flags. So we just don't want to have any red flags in our app that make them even think about calling. Makes sense, right? All right. I don't know what I put up in the first one. I don't know what. Oh, I think maybe this is just an example of how to write about research. People do it in different ways, but this is just an example because sometimes people don't know how to start reading, how to write about it. The thing about it is if you spend all of your 700 characters just going nitty gritty and the actual details of the research question or the research, the people reading it, unless they did that research, are not going to have a clue what you're talking about. And I will have no clue what you actually did. So your experience description is not the research. Your experience description is what did you do in the research. So make sure you describe whether analyze data, whether you did, you know, any of the processing. Um, just go into like your actual job. And then down below, one of the categories you can put in your experiences is awards, honors, and recognitions. So for most people, it's really just like Dean's List, unless you really did get an award, which is awesome. Most people I know don't get awards in college, so that's normal if you didn't. But if you have only Dean's List and you would just describe the criteria for getting on Dean's List, you would describe how many quarters you were on Dean's List. If you were over 15, this would be the first thing I would cut. If you're under 15, I'd say go ahead and put it in. The reason we cut it first is because they can already see your grades. This doesn't really provide any new information. If you struggled in college, like let's say you had a hard time at the beginning and you ended up on Dean's List, you can actually use that description to talk about how meaningful it was to get on Dean's List because, like as you can see here, they wrote, being a first generation college student and a transfer student, I initially faced challenges adapting to college. However, these accolades served as a source of inspiration, motivating me. So that's what I would recommend that you do with that space if you initially struggled in college. Okay. Oh, this is an example of the future that I was telling you about. So if they hadn't started it yet, they would put the month and put 0 hours and then put the next month and then put the hours that they have. Okay, this second one here is a meaningful description. So you can see what I mean when I say it's two separate boxes. I'm gonna let you scan that and see if you have any questions about what they wrote about. This was a research one. One of the biggest questions I get about research is whether you put your citation in there. And I find that this is so different for every person. Like some people are really not very just like they're not very narrative type writers. They're more like cut and dry and they want to put their citation. So instead of writing this all out, the 700, they'll actually maybe write like one or two sentences and they include the citation. I mean, do I think that's the most important thing? Probably not, but that's what they want to do. So if that's what they want to do, that's fine. I personally would keep it focused on what you took away from the process. There's also opportunities to no, that's the publication. That was the art that was the name of the magazine or the journal, sorry. Actually, I don't know what that is. Like, why would they write impact? I'm not sure what they were doing there, but it's not like that's not part of the thing. They wrote that in there. There was some reason they did that. Yeah, I see a hand up.
Yeah. Joanne, quick question. So, just so I'm clear, experience description, or with your meaningfuls, it's your experience description, which is the 700 characters, and then you add on like the most meaningful, and that's the 1325 characters, correct?
Yep, for three of them.
For three of them. Awesome. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Right. This is a different meaningful, and it's not about research. This is, um, yeah, kind of basic. Kind of basic. Got this person 14 interviews. I swear, sometimes, like I said, I go back and I look at some of my more successful applicants and I look at the things they chose to write about, and I'm always like, this is so basic. This is really not that profound, but it just keeps working. I think I don't know. I have a theory that I think when people try too hard, it comes across as kind of pre-medi. And if you're just like really honest and you're really like reflective about what you learned and what you did, I think that says so much more about you than just trying to be self-important. The worst thing you could do is have your app scream self-importance. And does anyone not know what I mean by that when I say self-importance? Okay. I usually will point it out to you if you are writing something that makes you sound self-important. I will usually just write self this makes you sound self-important. You don't want to sound self-important. You don't want to try to bolster yourself to make yourself sound like some amazing, fantastic person. They can sense you're already an amazing, fantastic person. You don't need to declare that about yourself. Generally speaking, when people declare how wonderful they are, they tend to not be the kind of people others want to hang around. So we don't want to do that. There's a way to do the humble bragging, but we're going to lean more into the humility. And when you talk about what you learned, it's received better than what you accomplished. And we definitely are not going to say that anyone thanked you. So that's another thing. Go through your writing, and if you're saying someone thanked you, take it out. You will not find anyone thanking someone in any of my applicants' writing. Uh, there's a couple problems with people thanking you. First of all, thanking people is usually a cultural norm. Even if I go get my hair cut and I hate my haircut, I'm still going to thank the person. I mean, that's just what people do. And second, like again, it's just like screams that like if someone thanked you, it made you feel good. So are you doing this just because you feel good? Like this is not about feelings. Um, feeling joy is only temporary. That's like a moment, that's an emotion. I think when you think about your career, the whole life, what you're gonna spend your entire life doing, dropping two to $400,000 on this, like it really shouldn't be based on emotions. It really should be based a little bit on your thoughtfulness, really thinking through why you're doing this, your future, your goals, your dreams in terms of what motivates you, what inspires you, but it really shouldn't be like feeling good. Again, people who make decisions because they feel good in the moment typically get divorced. No, I'm just kidding. Don't write that down. Um, You have to think through things a little bit more pragmatically. So, let's see. Okay, this is all the information that you are going to collect. And yeah, okay. I'm right on time with the 15-minute mark. Thank you, Mandy. All right, what questions do you have for me about experiences?
I had a quick question. I saw in the research example that the person included the name of the doctors or PI or something like that.
Mhm.
And I've heard sometimes, like, for shadowing experiences or um, medical assistant things, like some people say, oh, you should like name drop the doctor. And then I've also heard like leave their name out. I don't know if that's like
Well, you should definitely put their name in your experiences description because that's how they're going to know who you shadowed.
right. And then do you need to like would you recommend just you don't need to like repeat that again in the
Well,
description part?
like let's say hypothetically you shadowed six people and you listed them in the description, right? And so you had six doctors listed with different hours and different fields of in medicine next to their names. And then you chose to write about one of the doctors and you're meaningful. Yeah, it would make sense you would use their name. You would say, well, shadowing Dr. So and so. I mean, I kind of feel like even if you only had one, it would make sense to start out a story while shadowing Dr. So and so. Um, I don't I don't know. I guess I don't see the issue with that.
Okay, yeah, no, sounds good.
I realized I didn't show you an example of multiple shadowers. Let me find somebody. Any other questions while I'm looking for this?
Um, I have a kind of a small question.
Mhm.
Sometimes when I've started writing the experience, I've found that I feel like I'm done in less than 700 characters, and I feel like I've done the different things, and I have like 100 or even 200 characters left. Is that a sign that I need to add more, or is that normal?
Most of the time we can get it close to 700. I would say go back and think about what else you did and how you can potentially add more detail to it. I mean, that's a good problem to have because honestly, most people have the opposite problem.
Gotcha. Sounds good.
Yeah, I would say try harder.
Makes sense.
You can do it. Um, Other questions?
Joanne, I was curious about the whole art experience. Like, let's say like did ceramics in high school and then like did like a class in college. Like, does that help your like experiences or like shape you as a person? Or like, I don't
Um,
know.
yeah, so
Because it, yeah.
yeah, 100%. Like I would only put one. So if you did do ceramics since high school, I would just write that. I would put that as an artistic endeavor. And then think about what okay, when it comes to hobbies, the whole point of having a hobby is to show that you have an outlet to relax because obviously med schools really want you to be able to relax sometimes. And so if you still do it, like that's what I would say is like I still continue to make ceramics whenever I have a free moment. And or like let's say your hobby is fishing. You would say, I plan on bringing my fishing pole with me to medical school where I can continue this with my new friends or something. Um, that's why they want you to have the hobby. So as long as you can um, carry it with you or do it there. Sometimes people put like um, they put what am I trying to say? Oh, like surfing. And that's fine. Like if you're a surfer, you're a surfer. But at the end of the day, you can't take surfing with you to a lot of places. And so I sometimes wish that people have hobbies that are something they can take with them. Things that I don't think, things that I would not put as a hobby are reading, making dinner, and exercising. I kind of feel like those are activities that we should just do in life. And so, if you do, like, let's say you wanted to put your hobby as cooking, I would say, do you ever cook dinner for a lot, like other people? Because then you can like talk about serving up, like sharing your food, having dinners. Like you can make it more than just like cooking dinner. But generally, we all have to eat, and the only way to eat sometimes is to cook our dinner. So that's why I don't really see it as necessarily a hobby. Um, but if you do something more with it, like a lot of people bake, that's a really common thing. So if you do put baking, then I would say put like you share your baked goods with your friends or something like that. Trying to
Thank
think.
you.
Yeah. If you, sometimes people who read a lot, they will like they blog, they write reviews. I don't know what it's called. There's some website where people like write book reviews. I thought that was really cool. Um, but I've had people write about um, being makeup artists, being photographers for people. There's just like you can literally to write about anything you want. There's no like the only thing I actually know, let me back up. The only thing I would tell you not to write about is gaming. If you are a hardcore gamer, I just probably wouldn't. Um I think there's still just some stigma around that with older people. So I would try to find something else. I can't find it. I know I have, I mean, I know this is extremely common to write about multiple shadowers, so but I'm trying to do it quickly and I've opened up 5 apps and can't find a single one. So let me do some more digging and I'll find somebody who had multiple shadowers and I'll show that to you next time. Also, oh, Goodreads, yeah, that's what it was. Um, the other thing I need to talk about, and I know this won't apply to everybody, but in the application, there is a section called institutional actions, and it's for two things. It's if you had actual institutional action, meaning you were written up in school for something like cheating or alcohol in the dorms or something like that, that needs to be filled out, and you have 1325 characters to do that. And then the other reason you would fill that out is if you were ever on academic probation or subject to dismissal. So if that is true, then you actually definitely want to fill that out because there's no other place in your application to talk about what happened in your grades. So if you were ever on academic probation, even for a semester, I would definitely use that space to highlight the whatever hardship you were going through at that time so that they have some explanation for that. But otherwise, you don't have to worry about that. And then hopefully we don't have any misdemeanors or any other kind of situations like that. If we do, hopefully you have told me about it already, and we need to make sure we take care of that. Write about it. Trying to think of any other parts that we need to worry about writing. Oh, and Acomas and Asdas, as of last year, there was still a COVID question. I keep hoping every year that it's going to go away. Truthfully, at this point, nobody's really writing anything about COVID. Most people just write that they were not severely impacted by COVID. Their classes went online. They weren't able to do activities, like just one or two sentences, but they weren't negatively impacted. If you actually were negatively impacted, then of course you can write about that. But we are not going to dramatize if you were just at home and you took your classes online and you couldn't shadow and you couldn't do anything. We're not going to dramatize that because that's literally everybody's story. So uh, I have found that for the last 3 years, we've just written like two sentences and it's fine. Like they are getting in. So what we're going to keep doing. There's still, as of last year, a couple of schools still were asked about it on secondaries too. So I think I don't know what they're getting out of that answer, because everyone I'm talking to is just writing the same thing. Anyway, any last questions about anything under the sun?
I have one more quick question about experiences. I was just wondering how to walk the line and how technical to make descriptions of your research, because I know to focus more on what you learned, but I noticed in some of the examples there was probably more than I had written, like about specifically what they did. So I was curious about kind of
Yeah.
the
Well,
balance.
I just want to know, like, what was the research about? If you were, dissecting mouse brains, or you were, collecting leaves off the, I mean, like, just what was it about? What were you doing? And then what were you studying? Like, if you were on a research project that had something to do with diseases, I would love to know what that was. Like, what disease have you already been exposed to? And does that, because in the future, that might actually frame some of your future interests. But at this point, you guys, I want to stress to you that nothing I show you is written the first draft. These are all very edited things, right? I wouldn't expect you to bring me a very well written first draft of anything. Most of the time, it's gonna go through 2 or 3 rounds of editing before we're done. So the first time, all I ask is that when you bring me your experience, 700 character descriptions, like, try to keep it under like 900. Don't bring me 1,000 character descriptions, because it's just, at that point, I'm cutting so much that I don't know what's important. So if you can at least keep it down to like 900, I can usually trim the extra off and get it concise. So if you're not sure what to say, go ahead and say it, because I can help you cut it. But I'd rather you say more at this point and have a little bit extra that I can cut than have not enough and I'm missing details. So try not to worry too much about writing it for the first time. Just write. Let your just go wild, and then we'll fix it. Hopefully you guys are all learning not to get emotionally attached to your writing. Yes? Okay. I once had when I was getting my first master's degree, it was in English, and I had this professor, and he put us in a room, and he gave us this writing prompt, and he gave us, like, I don't know, 15, 20 minutes of writing. We all write this like very serious writing prompt, and we were writing it all out. It was on paper. I don't know. I guess he told us we had to do it on paper. Anyway, when we were all done, he told us to rip it up. He literally was like, just rip it up. And his whole point was he wanted to, I guess, teach us a lesson that writing was ephemeral. All the ideas are in our heads, that, we don't need we don't need to get that attached to the actual paper, the words on paper. So I know it's not exactly the same thing as what you guys are doing here, but it kind of makes me think about that sometimes, as I just casually delete entire sentences of yours. That's my approach when writing, is like, anything that we wrote can be rewritten and maybe better. So just write it, and it's not, it's okay that it's going to get edited a lot. All right. Any last questions? Okay, then let's call it a night. I will be around this week. If anybody has personal statements, if you're in my cohort and you have a personal statement that's cleaned up and ready, please email it to me. Like, literally email me the link, because I have extra time this week. I can read some of your personal statements and get you moving a little bit. So have a wonderful week. I will see you next Monday, and hopefully before then. All right. Bye, guys.
Thank you,
Bye, Joanne.
Joanna.
Thank you.
Thank you.